Okay, we are live and we need to get rid of that screen sharing there. Welcome to the ongoing public hearings of the Environment and Transportation Committee. I'm your chairman, Kumar Barve. I'm joined by my vice chair, Delegate Dana Stein, and the terrific members of the Environment and Transportation Committee. We have a total of 7 bills today, and I'm going to go through the order in which we're going to do them. The first bill is going to be House Bill 193, Dorchester County delegation, followed by House Bill Michelle Guyton's House Bill 264, followed by Delegate Moon's 208, Neil Parrott's House Bill 222. Al Carr will then have House Bill 230, followed by Julie Polakovich Carr's House Bill 254, and the last bill of the day will be Delegate Dana Jones's House Bill 283. So let's first go to a golf cart bill, and I understand that Delegate Chris Adams will be presenting this. Chris, welcome back to the committee. You've got 4 minutes.
It'll take 40 seconds, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Delegate Chris Adams, here to present House Bill 193, motor vehicle registration exemption for golf carts, Hooper's Island and Taylor's Island. The bill's a reintroduction and has a cross file in the Senate that's moving forward. The bill's been heard from the committee before, Mr. Chairman and Vice Chair, so I'll simply say that this is the top legislative priority for Dorchester County. Citizens in South Dorchester have asked for a number of years for this opportunity to use golf carts on county roads where driver limits are under 30 miles an hour. And I would ask the committee's favorable consideration of this bill. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. It appears that only one person has signed up to testify. Are there any questions for the witness of the sponsor? Delegate Jacobs, I believe, has the only hand up. So go ahead, Delegate.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Delegate, I know that we've had this bill in a couple of years, and I understand down there it's it's Taylor's Island. It's just kind of a rural island setting with just rural roads. What are they using now to get around down there?
Well, they're not using golf carts, so they're using diesel trucks. So I assume the watermen would be the recipient of this sort of benefit, and larger vehicles. Yeah, just keep in mind these are rural communities, and there are no state roads. These are all county roads with slow speed limits.
So there's no state roads on Taylor's Island, correct?
Well, there's the bridge, but we're not allowing the bridge to be used in this scenario. So there's Hooper's Island, Middle Hooper's Island, and then Taylor's Island.
All right, so you're not using them on state roads, which you can't do anyway. And what is currently in use is basically fossil fuel vehicles, diesels and whatnot. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So if you allowed these to be used there, you'd be going down that road of EVs, wouldn't you?
That is definitely a version of an EV.
All right, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Well, actually, it's a good question. Can you get golf carts that have gasoline motors?
Well, you sure could.
Okay. Any other questions for, I take it you're the chair of the Dorchester County delegation?
Yes, and I took the opportunity to include Delegate Sample Hughes, Speaker Pro Tem, and Delegate Mounts as signatories onto the bill. It's a big deal for Dorchester County this year. Okay,
looks like Delegate Boyce has a question as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you. It's good to see my good friend, Delegate Adams. Just to clarify, Delegate, so you're saying, so being registered doesn't allow you to drive where you need to drive, and registering them does?
Well, the bill is exempting the registration requirement. So there are some examples in Maryland, as I understand it, in Garrett County, snowmobiles don't have to be registered. And so in in my county, Dorchester County, the town of Vienna is currently allowed to use golf carts like this, the city of Crisfield. And then there's a community in St. Mary's County. So these end up being very rural counties where there's light traffic, and the citizens are asking for this mode of transportation. To make it work, you have to remove the registration requirement.
Interesting. And then how does motor vehicle and otherwise track a golf cart if it's not necessarily registered?
No more so, less so than Mike. The driver has to be licensed.
Got it.
All right. So there's obligations. It can only be done from dawn to dusk. So you can't drive these at night. There has to be certain lighting requirements. That's part of the bill. So over the years, Delegate Boyce, we've had to fine tune this bill based on some feedback from this committee and in the Senate. So, it has been introduced before, and with respect, I think we've brought this in probably the best form that we can possibly bring it and address some of the general concerns that you may have for a bill like this.
So it just sounds like it will be regulated on how to use it, even though it will not be registered with the motor vehicle.
If I understand your question correctly, the answer is yes.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, are there any other questions? I don't see any, so I believe that concludes the public hearing on House Bill 193. So, okay, so let's, hold on a second. Okay, next bill is House Bill 264. Delegate Guyton, welcome to the Environment and Transportation Committee. You have 4 minutes. The timer is, you'll see it's 2 minutes, and we'll cycle through it 2 times. So it's, as I like to say to people, it's like the old Love Connection show, 2 and 2, go.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hopefully I will not need that much time. For the record, I'm Delegate Michelle Guyton from District 42B in Baltimore County, and I'm here to request a favorable report on House Bill 264. House Bill 264 authorizes, it purely enables, the expansion of school speed enforcement zones to areas near nursery schools. Now, a nursery school is defined in COMAR, and so some people keep asking me, what is that? It's defined in COMAR as an educational program serving children 2 to 5 years old. So it is appropriate to consider them preschools, but in COMAR, they're still called nursery schools in this area. So current safe zone statute only includes K through 12 schools, but not preschool programs. So this change has been requested by community members to help address excessive speeds on major thoroughfares in my area. And we know that since being enacted in 2009 by this General Assembly, Maryland's Safe Zone program has been incredibly effective. So it's reported a near 90% reduction of vehicles speeding more than 12 miles above the speed limit in safe zone areas. And we feel very strongly that preschool children, nursery schools need similar protections. And a really great example of this, one also in my district, is Timonium United Methodist Church Nursery School on Hot Spring Road, a very big thoroughfare in the area. Speeding is already a problem on this road, with several serious accidents having occurred in just the past few years. And speed studies show over 10,000 cars travel the road each day. This is according to MDOT studies, and many moving over 60 miles per hour, which is actually twice the 30-mile-per-hour posted limit on that road. So authorizing a school zone for this nursery school allows placement of signage and speed cameras that will alert drivers to slow down because young children are nearby. House Bill 264 enables counties, again, it's authorizing, to implement school speed enforcement zones near nursery schools or preschools, if they choose to do so. I thank you for your attention to this matter, and I request a favorable report on House Bill 264. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. I believe we have a panel of about 5 or 6 people.
Sure. What we'll do is we'll go through all the people who are testifying in favor. Nobody is opposed, and then we'll entertain questions. But quickly, Michelle, are you standing doing this presentation? It looks like you're standing up.
I am not, but I probably should be exercising while I do it.
Okay.
No, this is my office background.
I was going to say it's a very cool angle.
This is where more better for you.
Yeah.
If this will help get my bill passed, I can.
Okay, no, that's fine. Sachin Hebar is the first person signed up. Sachin, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay, terrific. You've got the floor, 2 minutes. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Chairman Burway and members of Environment and Transportation Committee. I'm Sachin Hebar, a resident of Lutherville in Baltimore County, and I'm an at-large member of Baltimore County Pedestrian and Bicycle Advisory Committee. I thank Delegate Guyton for introducing HB 264, and I'm here to speak in favor of it. Encouraging people to use alternative modes of transit is important to combat climate change, and pedestrian safety is at the heart of encouraging adoption of alternate means of transit. We have to make it safe for children to walk to schools. Parents and children not only need to be safe, but also need to feel safe while dropping off children at schools. Now, there is no reason why children in nursery school should be excluded from being or feeling safe from cars near their institutes of learning. This gap in deployment of speed cameras should be closed. The Zero Deaths Maryland website reported 125 pedestrian fatalities in 2021, and we need to utilize all tools at our disposal to make Maryland safe for pedestrians. A CDC study that looked at the effectiveness of automated speed camera enforcement showed that it reduced total crashes 8% to 49%, and fatal and serious injury crashes 11% to 44% in studies that compared pre and post crash data collected near camera sites. Speed cameras are non-intrusive and they are extremely effective in traffic calming. In fact, it is so effective that the head of Pedestrian Council of Australia once described speed cameras as the best thing since sliced bread for pedestrian safety. This is a good bill. I believe this will have a positive impact and make our communities safer and more accessible, and I strongly encourage this committee to vote in favor of this bill. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Next up, Jeff Myers. Jeff, welcome to the committee. You have 2 minutes, sir. Jeff, I believe you have to unmute yourself.
Sorry about that. I figured you all were doing the unmuting. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon. I'm Jeff Myers, President of the Pot Spring Community Association in Timonium. It should not be news to you that speeding is out of control. Speeders are now routinely driving 15 miles per hour over the speed limit. Many are doing 20 to 30 miles over. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration just reported this week that traffic deaths are way up, even though people are traveling fewer miles on average. A headline in yesterday's Sun paper was U.S. road deaths jump at record pace as risky driving habits persist. Excessive speeding is not just happening on interstates, it's happening on roads everywhere around our state, including feeder roads in our rural and suburban neighborhoods. I do not know how to solve this national problem, but HB 264 can be one part of the solution in Maryland. We have speeding problems in my neighborhood. People are driving like crazy on Pot Spring Road, which has a 30-mile-per-hour speed limit. We recently had an accident so severe that people had to be transported to shock trauma via helicopter. This on a 30-mile-per-hour road. The problem is so bad that the Baltimore County Police requested the County Traffic Bureau to study the issue. At a community meeting, police officers and traffic engineers told me that the only thing that really slows down drivers is speed cameras. Well, I thought there's a solution. We'll get the county to put up a speed camera at our local nursery school. There's one hitch. The school speed camera statute currently only applies to grades K through 12. HB 264 will change the statute to include preschools. I know that sometimes it can take years to get a bill passed in the General Assembly. Please do not make us come back next year with the bill named in memory of a nursery school student killed by a speeding driver. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next up, Eric Rockel with the Greater Timonium Community Council Organization. Eric, welcome to the committee. You have 2 minutes, sir. Eric, you there? Well, let's go to Tara Ackerman, and if Eric shows up, we'll admit him. Tara, welcome to the committee. Are you there?
I'm here.
Okay, terrific. Welcome to the committee. You have 2 minutes.
All right, thank you. Chair Barbe, Vice Chair Stein, and esteemed members of the Environment and Transportation Committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of HB 264. My name is Tara Lystra Ackerman, and I'm here on behalf of the National Safety Council, or NSC, which is America's leading nonprofit safety advocate. NSC is also proud to lead the National Road to Zero Coalition with the goal of eliminating roadway fatalities by 2050. We also have a chapter located in Baltimore. In order to achieve this goal of zero fatalities, we must take advantage of all available tools, including automated enforcement technologies. As you know, in Maryland, automated enforcement is highly effective in slowing down drivers and helping to ensure people drive at posted speeds, which reduces the severity and likelihood of crashes. In Maryland and across the country, pedestrian fatalities are increasing. There's been a 25% increase here in the state in pedestrian fatalities over the past 5 years. So far this year, 12 pedestrians have been killed in crashes on Maryland roads. And nationally, 17% of children under 14 that are killed on our roads were pedestrians. More needs to be done to protect our most vulnerable road users. It is so important to keep our youngest community members safe, and expanding the use of automated enforcement to include nursery school zones will ensure proper speed adherence in these high-risk areas. We should provide the highest level of safety for nursery school zones, ensuring vehicles operating around them are driving at posted lower speeds. In order to help communities implement these programs with safety as the top priority, NSC, along with other traffic safety groups, released an automated enforcement checklist last year. This list provides steps to ensure these programs reduce crashes and prevent deaths and injuries while building community support. Eliminating roadway fatalities cannot be done without massive near-term gains in highway safety, and we must use every tool at our disposal to save these lives, which includes stronger laws around speed enforcement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is Eric Rockel in the house?
Yes, I am, Mr. Chairman. I couldn't unmute myself before.
Okay, well, you're here now, so please welcome to the committee, and you have 2 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Eric Rockel. I'm the president of an umbrella group called the Greater Timonium Community Council. We count as our members about 40 to 50 individual community associations throughout Lutherville, Timonium, and Cockeysville. I'm here today because it's this community that has asked the delegate Guyton to introduce this legislation, but I know from speaking with leaders in other communities at various functions and events that speeding is just a systemic problem throughout all of Baltimore County. This provides another tool in the toolkit to solve the problems with speeding. Most recently on Pot Spring Road, which has already been mentioned, there have been, to my knowledge, at least 2 cases where speeding caused drivers to exit the paved road. In one instance, they crashed into a monument sign. In another instance, they ended up in someone's backyard. God forbid that they would leave the road and crash into a nursery school property. I ask this committee to favorably support the proposed legislation, and thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you very much. I believe the last witness is Bill George with the Maryland Municipal League. Bill, welcome back to the committee.
Thank you to the chair and members of the committee. Bill George with the Maryland Municipal League, here today in support of House Bill 264. As has been mentioned, speeding is becoming an increasing problem in municipalities as well as parts of the counties. The proliferation of GPS apps is taking cars off of roads and onto others that are not necessarily designed to have that level of traffic. And that includes roads with schools. As you know, municipalities are currently authorized to put speed cameras in school zones after a public process. And this bill would create a reasonable and incremental change to expand to nursery schools as well. It keeps in line with the thought process of the initial speed camera program, of protecting those most vulnerable, primarily children, through the adoption of school zones. So with that, Maryland Municipal League offers support for this bill and asks for a favorable report.
All right, thank you very much. We have several questions. The first will go to Delegate Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Delegate Guyton, am I correct in assuming that the term daycare would fall under nursery?
Thank you for that question. That's one I want to make sure that everyone understands. There is a distinction between child care centers and nursery schools. So you can have nursery schools are a type of child care centers, but they're a more exclusive group, and not every nursery school is a child care center. So I said that backwards. So yes, there is a difference. Child care centers can operate sort of more as babysitters, as daycare programs. Nursery schools really should be thought of more along the lines of preschools. They must involve an educational program, and they don't serve infants and small toddlers. They serve 2 to 5 year olds. So there is a big difference between those.
Well, I guess my other question from that is, we have Montessori schools and in the rural areas that act as both Montessori school and a daycare. So would they fall under the definition in your bill?
Sure, I have the COMAR definition in front of me. So I do believe, Delegate, that if the Montessori school is there providing the educational program, that would include that school as well. So if it were just the daycare, it would not, but since they have that educational component, it does fall under the COMAR regulation for nursery schools.
Okay,
So,
thank you. And one other quick question, if I may. Did I understand you to say that this was enabling legislation for the counties, or is this?
Yes, it is enabling, it's an authorizing. They cannot do it without this authorization.
Thank you very much.
Okay, next question goes to Delegate Lehrman.
Thank you. So we in the past actually had a bill similar to this, but I wanted basically what Delegate Clark said spelled out why this is different. And I just wanted to, have you talked to Delegate Fisher at all about her past bill?
Thank you, Delegate. I have not. So I wasn't aware of that.
Okay, because I think her bill was the child care center version, and this bill is the nursery school center version. So your bill is actually more narrowly tailored, which I think is what we were looking for. So thanks. I just wanted to clarify for the committee. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that question. Actually, we have talked to the county about this bill as well, and they actually are supportive of it. That is the piece that they wanted to clarify as well, that not every child care center or home child care center could then request a camera. So they cannot under this legislation.
Delegate Lehman is next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to my friend Delegate Guyton for bringing this bill. I think it's a good one. I also wanted to understand a little bit more about your statement that it's enabling legislation. If you could elaborate and say, what would a county or a municipality have to do if this becomes law? Would they take up the law themselves and include and have to pass it locally and include, say, their own standards for deciding, where these cameras might go? What does that look like?
Thank you, my friend Delegate Lehman. I appreciate that question, and I'm going to give you the answer that I best understand to be true, and I could be a little bit off on this. Currently, this is already in statute for other school areas. They don't authorize them for every single school. So not every school has a problem that feels like they need the signage and the speed cameras. When the county decides that they do have a place where they feel like this would be really impactful, then they still go through the process of having to present it to the higher ups at the county and voting on that. So I believe it's actually a county council vote that would put it in place, but I do not believe they would have to readapt the legislation. Again, if I'm wrong, it's possible, but that's my understanding.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The next question goes to the vice chair of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I want to give a shout out to Mr. Eric Rockwell. Thank you for your testimony. And Delegate, thank you for bringing this bill. And I guess this just goes back to Delegate Lehman's question. Your intention is that the procedures that a county would have to go through if this bill were to pass to authorize speed cameras at nursery schools would be the same that they go through in authorizing speed cameras at other schools. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the sponsor or any of the witnesses? It appears no one's signed up in opposition. So if there are no further questions, thank you, Delegate Guyton. That ends the public hearing on this bill. We will move next to House Bill 206. Delegate Moon, congratulations again on being the new Vice Chair of Judiciary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon, ENT friends. Unfortunately, I'm here on what appears to be a biannual visit to clean up some of the criminal penalties in the transportation article. And so that's basically what House Bill 206 does. In prior iterations, we've really tried to move away from having jailable penalties on some of the more trivial driving offenses. In this case, the public defenders came to me with yet another one that they see appearing in court improperly. So if you'll see here, the bill repeals basically a vague catch-all crime that says a person may not do any act forbidden or fail to perform any act required by this title. A violation comes with up to 2 months in jail. And so I actually went through the transportation article, Title 16, driver's licenses, and counted 125 separate laws, each with subsections and different penalties and provisions and subcodes that would all be supposedly at the discretion of an officer to charge with a 2-month jailable offense. If you look at the fiscal note, you'll see not hardly even one of these charges sticks. Last year, there were over 1,800 of these violations alleged, only one guilty. I don't know how many of you are lawyers, but in law, rules of statutory interpretation do not look kindly upon criminal laws that are vague and not easy for the public to understand. You can look up the rule of lenity, but there's a reason why these charges don't stick, so it's time to get rid of it. The only, and I'm happy to answer any questions, the only caveat here, I think you're going to hear from MVA with a possible amendment that they would like to clarify that a fake address in a license or moped license application would be illegal. I mean, you guys will have to decide. The public defenders don't think that's impacted by this repeal one way or the other. And I just in looking at the code tend to think it's covered by existing law. In fact, in the bill text itself, it restates section of law making it illegal already to knowingly conceal a material fact, knowingly make a false statement, or otherwise commit fraud. So that law already has catch-alls within it. So I'm happy to answer any questions. And I believe we have one public defender here with us too.
Yeah, Mr. Vice Chair, before I go on to her, I have to ask, did you really go into the code and count the number of times this appeared?
I do like to do code audits.
Well, the speaker certainly did a good job choosing the new vice chair of the Judiciary Committee. That's all I can say. Okay, we're going to go to Christine Dufour with the Office of the Public Defender. Christine, welcome to the committee. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Barbee and Vice Chairman Stein. Thank you for taking the time to hear from me. I will urge a favorable report on House Bill 206. And as Delegate Moon said, and thank you very much, Delegate Moon, for being so responsive, this I view as the continuum of the good work this body has done to eliminate strict penalties for such things as possessing a suspended license, displaying a suspended license, which formerly carried 6 months in jail and 12 points. Now it's a payable fine only with 3 points. However, if someone is stopped and they display a suspended license, the officer has the discretion to actually charge them with the 60-day jailable offense and 12 points. What that causes is the potential for the officer to then take the person out of the car and search them, search the car. If the client fails to appear in court, a warrant can be issued. They can be held without bond. This really impacts Queen Anne's County, quite frankly. My colleagues came to me in my former life. I was down at the government relations team, and it's good to see a lot of familiar faces, I will say, to ask Delegate Moon to take a look at this vague statute and to ask for the repeal. It affects all Marylanders because oftentimes it's charged against people coming over the bridge to a vacation in the Eastern Shore or Ocean City. So although it's seen frequently in Queen Anne's County, it impacts all Maryland who travels through on Route 50 across the bridge. I wanted to thank this committee very much because I am the supervising attorney in Talbot County. I formerly worked in Montgomery, and the impact that you have had on repealing jailable offenses in rural communities is amazing. People are able to get their licenses back. And here, as you know, there's very few options for public transportation. So I have seen the real impact every day. I do felony work, but I also do district court work. And it's amazing how people can get stuck in the cycle of MVA and penalties for failing to pay fines, et cetera, and then losing their license to a suspension. And this body has really improved Marylanders' lives in the rural communities. And we ask that you go one step further and repeal this vague statute, a catch-all statute. Thank you.
Well, I was going to cut you off for exceeding your time limit, but then you started heaping praise upon my committee and I couldn't stop you. So there you go. Any questions for the Vice Chair Judiciary or Ms. Dufour? Any questions? Okay, David, you got out of my committee unscathed this time. Nobody signed up to testify at all. So that will end the public hearing on this bill. We will go now to House Bill 222, Neil Parrott. You're up next, Neil. Well. Neil, all you're doing is reminding me about how much I hate the wintertime with that last graphic. Okay, Neil, you ready? Are you muted? What's going on here?
Okay, is this it?
Yes, you're on. We can hear you. You've got 4 minutes. Go.
Very good. Well, Mr. Chairman and committee, it's great to present this bill to you again this year. Last year, it passed our committee. It passed in the House. And on signing die, unfortunately, it got stalled in the Senate. But this year, we do have a Senate version that is being introduced by Senator George Edwards as SB 416. So I'm hoping that we get it all the way through so that we can help people in our state. So this bill, what it does, it's on rural highways, on interstates in Maryland, would encourage drivers who are traveling slower than the general speed to stay to the right lanes when practical. And what this would do is it would help driver safety. We'd have less fatalities, safer highways, and the fast lane would be reserved for the fast lane, so people aren't weaving all the way back and forth as we see a lot of times on these rural highways. Research shows that by cars driving side by side, going the same speed, that can result in major traffic buildups, of course, with frustration from the people behind them. And of course, sometimes you'd have road rage in those situations. And this last slide is on I-95. Sometimes we had the police that would 55 miles an hour and created huge backups during the rush hours. Of course, that's when 55 was the national speed limit. Of course, the more congestion, the higher risk of crashes. Basically keeping drivers to the right when unless they're passing, is just a good rule of thumb. A lot of other states do it, as you'll see in a second. This is just a photo showing that having that left lane as a passing lane is very effective. Of course, this talks about the road rage. Make sure we stay under the 4 minutes here. And we don't want to have more aggressive driving. If we keep people to the right who are driving slower and just really that left lane for passing, it helps reduce different crashes, as that slide shows. Now, how will this be enforced? The bill right now, it's not going to be enforced by the police. It's really just simply placing signs, utilizing the overhead signs that are already there, just to let people know, because this is already being taught to new drivers, but it's not being reinforced at all. And Marylanders especially do not follow that rule, but other states do. So of course, this bill is heavily on educating, and the state highway would put up different signs. The fiscal note is $30,000 on this one at this point, making the assumption that they just use a few targeted roads. Here's a big slide. This rule protects Marylanders when they go to other states, because a lot of them are ticketed and they have no idea why. You just go to Virginia, you can be ticketed for staying in that left lane and going too slowly. Same thing with Pennsylvania. So this would help educate our drivers, not only for when they're driving in Maryland, but protect them from getting tickets when they go to other states. Really, this bill just encourages drivers to be courteous, to move over, unless you have a reason to be in that left lane for passing. And by allowing others to pass, help relieving congestion, drivers have more of a pleasant and efficient drive when they're driving in Maryland. Again, this will help us to have safer interstates. It'll reduce congestion, encourage more courteous driving, and allow motorists to be happier as they drive on Maryland's roads and protect those motorists from getting tickets in other states. So that's it. I just encourage that we would pass HB 222 again this year, and hopefully we see it all the way through.
So before I recognize anybody who has questions, Neil, is this bill identical to the way it was when it left our committee last year?
I believe it is, yes.
Okay, first question goes to Delegate Fraser Hidalgo.
Okay, yeah, Delegate Parrott. So here is my series of kind of questions. Last year, the bill, I believe, was amended and we did not have an updated fiscal note. It then went over to the Senate, got an updated fiscal note, and that updated fiscal note was several times higher than this current fiscal note. So I guess my big suggestion would be, can you go back and figure out how the bill is different? Because the fiscal note is substantially different than what actually made it over to the Senate. I don't recall exactly how that happened, but it did. We had a different fiscal note, went over to the Senate, it got really big, stalled there because of that. So I want to really inoculate against that. I want to figure out what that is before we, that's my, if you can answer that now, great. If you need to come back with those answers, but that is a really big concern.
No, you're right. That's one thing that stalled it in the Senate. And the fiscal note this year does refer to how it was higher last year. It was like 130,000. The assumption was from the state highway, the input that they had given the fiscal note writer was that they were going to put out a lot more signs, about 500. And this fiscal note shows about 60 signs. Last time it was on all the big interstates. Now they're really focusing on the rural interstates like the bill calls for. And it's really just three of them. I think it's I-80. So it's I-68, I-70, and I-83. So with those changes that the state highway is looking at, that's what drew the fiscal note down to 30,000.
All right. So it's okay. So it's substantially different than last year's bill in that it is much more restrictive on which highways this would be applicable and implemented on.
Yes, that's the way the state highway is looking at it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next question goes to Delegate Sheila Ruth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Delegate Parrott, I'm a little confused and I just wondered if you could help me understand. I was looking at the fiscal note and it says current law on every roadway, any vehicle going at least 10 miles per hour below the applicable maximum speed limit or less than the normal speed of traffic under existing conditions generally must be driven in the right-hand lane or as close as practicable. Can you explain how this is different than that? I wasn't quite understanding that. It sounds like that's.
Sure. So let's say the speed limit on the road, like I-70, it's 70 miles an hour. So let's say it's 70 miles an hour. Sure, if you're going 60 or slower, then you would need to be in that far right lane, probably with your four-way flashers on because you're going to get run over. But at 70 miles an hour, if you're going 70, this bill would suggest that you shouldn't be in the left lane unless you're passing someone at 70 miles an hour. So unless you're passing, you really want to stay to the right. So those people are going 70 miles an hour or to the right. And for some reason, if someone needs to be going faster than that, then they're in the left lane. But the bottom line is that it allows for more smooth traffic. And this is the way that people drive in other states. And it really works well. I was just on I-81 in Pennsylvania, just noticing just how nice that was, because the trucks especially, they're going 70, sometimes even 65. They are staying to the right. And then that allows a lot of the traffic to go around them on the left side, and they get back to the right while they're not passing.
Yeah, thank you. And I don't disagree that we want people who are driving slower to drive to the right. But it seems to me what this is saying is the current law is that anyone traveling less than the normal speed of traffic must drive on the right. Am I not understanding that?
So if they're going 10 miles, I think what you read was 10 miles an hour under the speed limit, they have to be to the right, which is true. This is not just if you're actually under the speed limit. This, you can be going the speed limit. You could actually be going over the speed limit, but unless you're passing someone, you should be in that right lane.
Yeah, but it says 10 miles per hour below the maximum speed limit or at less than the normal speed of traffic under existing conditions.
Right. And this would suggest that you're not necessarily going less than the regular conditions would allow. I mean, you might be going 75 miles an hour, but you'd be in that right lane. And then if somebody wants to go 80 or like 76, they could go around you on the left. So unless you're passing, it would encourage you to stay to the right. And one thing this does too is it's really an education bill to alert motorists that this is really how we should be driving, when in Maryland, a lot of people just simply aren't doing that. And what it avoids, and I see it all the time on I-70s, we go up and down South Mountain. There's a big range of speeds as you're going up and down mountains. If the slower drivers would stay to the right, then you wouldn't have these cars, and you see in little cars or even motorcycles that are weaving in and out of traffic to the right, to the left. That's very hazardous. If everybody would stay to the right, then that driver could just stay on the left lane, make those passes, and then get back over to the right side.
Thank you. I agree that the signs seem like a good idea. I'm still not confused about the other part, but I don't want to hold things up anymore. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Dana, can you take over for a minute? And the next witness is Delegate Foley.
Sure. Delegate Foley. You're on mute. Delegate Foley.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Delegate Parrott, I'm a little confused about what this bill does, and I just want to clear it up because I think I heard you say in your presentation, and I think I just heard you say right now, that what this bill does is it just requires signage and driver education about driving in the right lane. But the fiscal note talks about a violation being a misdemeanor with a maximum fine of $500. So I just want to be clear, what is there a penalty, a citation attached to this, or is it just informational?
It's informational. There are no new penalties or anything in this bill.
No new penalties, but can someone get a ticket for violating this? I'm just unclear.
No, not in Maryland. No, you can't.
Because it seems like the fiscal note says that you can, and that's, I think, why I'm confused.
Yeah, that makes sense. If the actual bill, when you read it, it's all about education and signs. There's nothing about being able to get a fine or a ticket, and that's not in current law. You can't get a ticket for being in the left lane and driving the speed limit, for instance. That's
great. So really, what's going on here is driver education and the driver education curriculum, and then the signs, right? That's really what this.
That's it.
With the idea that we know what the concept is, but that's really what this bill calls for, right?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Delegate Healy.
Thank you very much. Delegate Parrott, I just want to understand two things. Do you have anything on the signs that would be put up that says that it's the law, or is it just advisory, or just, just sort of a letting you know that that's just keep left? It doesn't say keep left under penalty of law or anything like that.
No, I'd imagine the signs would be similar to other signs that are out there, like I'm talking about on I-70 in the mountainous parts. It says trucks must keep right. They can't be in the left lane. I would envision that they would say slower traffic, keep right, something like that. And that would be up to the State Highway Administration to come up with that message. But it wouldn't say that it's state law, because you're not going to get a fine or anything for that.
And does the bill say it should only be on these rural areas? Because usually state highways, state police usually want to have uniform law throughout the state. And that was like an issue when we talked about this before.
Yeah, so this is for rural interstate highways. And this should be for the courtesy that this is the kind of way we should be driving on all the interstates. But this bill is targeted on the rural interstate highways. So those would be the ones that would be getting the signs, not every interstate in the state. And for instance, this definition is also used when you look at the speed limits, maximum speed limits. Like the rural interstates, they can go up to 70 miles an hour in Maryland. And some of the other regular interstates, 65 would be their highest speed limit.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, I think Delegate Parrott, that was the last question for you. Thank you very much. That ends the bill hearing for House Bill 222. Next, we'll move on to House Bill 230, Delegate Palakovich-Carr. Well, I'm sorry, Delegate Clark. I'm sorry.
Different car, right? I'm back.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No relation, by the way, although I do get her mail in my General Assembly mailbox pretty often.
Welcome
Mr.
back.
Chairman.
Yep.
Distinguished ENT colleagues, for the record, I'm Delegate Al Carr. I'm here to present House Bill 230. Unsafe driving behavior has been a concern for many years, and it's only gotten worse during the pandemic. House Bill 230 will help make our streets safer. Under current law, a person who endangers you or your family by driving at an unsafe speed can do so with impunity if they happen to be driving a rental car. That's because vehicles owned by a rental car are exempt from receiving speed camera citations. House Bill 230 would end the exemption. Maryland is an outlier of the 17 states that allow automated enforcement for speed. Only Maryland and Georgia exempt rental cars. How often does it happen that a vehicle owned by a rental car company is detected racing past a camera? It's not a small number. In Montgomery County alone, it happens 40,000 times a year. That's over 100 times a day. This represents about 9% of the potential citations that are simply discarded. On state highway work zones, it happens about 24,000 times each year. House Bill 230 follows the model used successfully in Washington state. Under the bill, if the vehicle in question is a rental, a notice is sent to the rental car company. The company then has 45 days to respond back with the name and mailing address of the renter. The citation can then be sent directly to the renter. The Washington state approach works. Contrary to their written testimony, companies like Enterprise, Alamo, and National are able to comply and are sending the renter information back to the jurisdiction in response to the notice. Thanks to the DLS library, we have the receipts from Seattle. Baltimore City sent a letter of opposition citing the additional paper and postage that would be required under the bill. They have a point. I'm offering a sponsor amendment inspired by John DiLorenzo to help agencies and rental car companies by automating the processing of notices and citations. The amendment would allow them to be sent electronically instead of being printed on paper and mailed individually. That's how it already works in Maryland for the large volume of video tolls sent to rental companies. I also support MDOT's suggestion that the bill be clarified to ensure that it applies to speed cameras placed in work zones. In closing, just a quick word about the legislative history. The original bill was heard in 2016 in this wonderful committee. The committee believed the idea had merit, so they sent it to interim study. That resulted in a 2017 bill the General Assembly enacted to end the rental car exemption for school bus cameras. That bill followed the Washington state model, and it became the template for DLS to include in all automated enforcement legislation drafted since. I also introduced a bill last year, House Bill 383, that would have done the same thing for red light cameras. In the interest of safety, I asked for your favorable report.
Okay, I'm going to call on Michael DiLorenzo to testify. He'll have 2 minutes and then we'll go to questions. Mr. DiLorenzo, welcome to the committee. You have 2 minutes.
Hello, delegates. I testified last year on this, and now that we're going to be expanding speeding cameras onto interstate highways like I-83, you can tell by the 40,000 and 24,000 and unknown number of thousand tickets that we're talking about issuing that my office could get overwhelmed very quickly. I'm a car rental operator here in Maryland, headquartered in Laurel, and we got 72 speeding camera tickets in the last 6 days. So I had my office count them this morning. So you can see these numbers get really big. They never stop sending us tickets. I want to make sure everybody understands. We get every speeding camera ticket right now, and on the back of every ticket, like I sent you all last year, it gives us an opportunity to manually fill out a form and send it back to the jurisdiction, yet creating more postage. And it is a terrible use of our time that's very labor intensive. So what I've proposed to Delegate Carr is that we build a data bridge where we can move this data back seamlessly and instantly. It's through the Open Travel Alliance. We could build specifications. We could build this in 3 weeks and do it for less than 10 grand. So it's less than the cost of postage for everybody to do this digitally. We can't have digital tickets being administered with a paper process on the back end. It's impossible for us to keep up as we issue more and more tickets. And now we're going to have speeding cameras next to nursery schools. You can see this is going to keep growing and growing and growing. So I'm begging you to please authorize this to be done with a data bridge. Just like I receive reservations from all over the world, I can turn on a new reservation channel, deliver rates and availability, and get the customers booking, and I can build that whole channel in 3 weeks. And I spend less than 10 grand to do that. All you need is a license plate, a date, and a time, and I give you back a name of a customer who had the car and an address, and you send the ticket out to the customer on time within your guidelines. So this is so simple, and I guess I'm past my 2 minutes. I'm sorry, Delegate Barbie.
That's okay. Okay, questions. We have a number of questions. The first, and I believe, yeah, everybody who wants to testify has testified. So first question goes to Delegate Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question for the sponsor. I remember previous iterations of this bill, there's always a concern about the difficulty to track down these rental car drivers because I guess a fair number of them are out of state. Could you just talk a little bit about what how many of these folks are out of state and sort of are presumably unreachable, and how many of them are in state and presumably reachable?
Yeah, thank you, Delegate, for that excellent question. So, and I think this also gets to the issue of, rental car drivers, they fly into BWI on a plane, they don't live here. What's the point of sending them a ticket? They're not coming back. So, I saw one report that said rental, and Mike would have certainly some better data than me, but that rental car business is, 50-50, half locals and half travelers. And interestingly, I saw a page on Uber's website that if you don't have a car and you want to drive for Uber, they will set you up with a rental car. So we've got rental cars out there that are really Ubers. And I've also observed that in my neighborhood, some of the Amazon delivery vans are rental vehicles as well. So I think everyone should be respecting our rules of the road, whether you're local or a traveler or an Uber driver, and that's why this bill should be passed.
Oops. Next question goes to Delegate Boyce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just want to check in with Mike DiLorenzo. And if I'm hearing you correctly, if we can figure out how to allow you electronically to send back those tickets, you would support this legislation?
Yes.
Okay. And I think for Delegate Carr, the question is can we do that, or have we been in contact with MBA to be able to do that?
Yeah, thank you, Delegate. So there's a sponsor amendment that does exactly that. I think the language in the current statute is kind of old, and it envisions paper, printing out an individual citation on paper and mailing it in the US mail. So I think we can simply change that in the statute to allow this type of electronic exchange of information. That is what is already done for tolls. So I think there's no reason that can't be done for these type of citations if we alter the statute.
And then I guess my final question is, we do them for tolls, but do we already have the technology in place to do it for these types of tickets?
No.
So, and Mike may want to answer this one, but I can't imagine it would be that difficult if a jurisdiction asks their vendor to, instead of printing these out on paper, to put them into a Excel spreadsheet or other type of electronic transmission and send them. I think, given direction, I think vendors can easily comply with something like this.
Thank you. I look forward to working on this. I'm excited.
Next question goes to Delegate Healy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Delegate, I'm just curious about just a sec. There's somebody at my door. I'll ask you offline. Thank you.
I hate it when that happens. Every time that happens, I hate it. Okay, any questions for the sponsor or the witness? Seeing none, then we will, that's the end of the public hearing for this bill. We will go to House Bill 254. Delegate Polakovich-Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, colleagues. For the record, I'm Delegate Julie Polakovich-Carr, here to present House Bill 254.
And you have 4 minutes, 2 minutes, two times.
Thank you. This is a bill to make roads safer for pedestrians and bicyclists. And it is, in fact, a follow-up to a piece of legislation that we enacted in 2019, thanks to the work of this committee, to enact a statewide goal of Vision Zero. And that's a goal of no roadway fatalities or serious injuries by the year 2030. Maryland is actually the 4th state to pursue Vision Zero, and a number of our counties and municipalities are also pursuing this goal. Vision Zero is based on the idea that traffic deaths are preventable. And then in fact, while a person may fail in a given situation, the roadway system should not. And infrastructure is a key part of reaching that goal of Vision Zero. Now, in the few years since we enacted the Vision Zero legislation, I do want to acknowledge the work of Administrator Christy Nizer and her staff in working to implement that bill. But at this point, we really have reached a crisis level in terms of roadway fatalities, both here in Maryland and nationally. Just in yesterday's Wall Street Journal, they had an article that was headlined, "Car Crash Death Toll Sees a Record Surge." Unfortunately, we are really moving in the wrong direction in terms of the statistics of the number of people who are being killed on roads nationally and here in Maryland. So there is an urgent need to act to ensure that we are protecting all Marylanders, but especially the most vulnerable roadway users, and that's pedestrians and bicyclists, since they are much more likely to be killed if they are involved in a roadway crash. So what the bill does is it would require the State Highway Administration to conduct an infrastructure review at the site of each fatal crash on a state roadway that involves a pedestrian or bicyclist. That review would look at infrastructure deficiencies, basically look for ways to make that stretch of roadway or that intersection safer. And then the bill would also require SHA to publicly release the results of that review. You're going to hear from other stakeholders about the need for this legislation and really where some of the problem areas are in the state, but I hope that we can act to protect the lives of Marylanders and to ensure that more lives are not needlessly lost on our roads. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to the first witness, which will be Joshua Feldmark with Bike Maryland. Joshua, welcome back to the committee. You've got 2 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I do want to, although I learned in the last hearing that you're supposed to do this at the end, so you get extended time. I wanted to thank the whole committee for your leadership over the past several years. And it's not hyperbole to say that this committee is a core reason why Maryland is moving in the right direction and is in fact taking a leadership role across the country. So I'm here representing Bike Maryland, as well as a coalition of other cyclists and pedestrian organizations. You know, as I said, there's a lot of key pieces of legislation that you guys have put forward over the last several years. And as Delegate Balakovich-Carr mentioned, Vision Zero was really, although it didn't get quite the fanfare, was really a sort of revolutionary switch in how we think about transportation planning. And so instead of saying that we are trying to get people from point A to point B in their cars as fast as possible, what we're saying is that we are going to try and get people to their destination, regardless of their vehicle, as safely as possible. And doing this switch really just changes the way we think about this infrastructure. But passing that bill, while a really important first step, starts to fail if we don't pass this important next step, which is to look at our infrastructure where there are problem spots and find out where through infrastructure we can really make significant improvements. And then sort of on the tail end of that, what I will say is, although again, we're moving from speed to safety, it will say that these two things are not completely separate. After a study done with our colleagues at Bikemore, the Baltimore area, that the overwhelming majority of their traffic slowdowns are non-recurring, which means that they're coming from crashes. So if we can improve the infrastructure to get rid of the crashes, then that means that our traffic will in fact speed up. So we're excited about that. And with that, I'm here for any questions and urge a favorable report.
Well, whenever Bike Maryland testifies and says something nice about my committee, I know that somewhere right now, Kim Lamphere is smiling. So, okay, next witness is Mayor Kate Stewart of Tacoma Park, where I went to junior high school. Madam Mayor, welcome to the committee. You've got 2 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you so much. The City of Tacoma Park supports the goals and intent of House Bill 254 and urges favorable consideration. A great deal needs to be done to shift how we look at pedestrian and bike safety. The Vision Zero Implementation Act would provide a tool to help shift the car-focused paradigm that now dictates how we approach our communities. While we also need to prevent fatalities, this bill would put in place procedures that are long overdue to assess the safety on SHA roadways where a pedestrian or bicyclist fatality has occurred. The City of Tacoma Park strongly endorses this bill as a municipality with many SHA roadways and firsthand experience with how long it could take to have assessments and engineering countermeasures proposed and then actually implemented. We thank the individual SHA traffic engineers we have worked with in the city. Unfortunately, many of the barriers to address roadway safety are built into SHA and how it is structured and conducts its work. The Vision Zero Implementation Act addresses one aspect of the current dysfunction. You all know the hard numbers, as we've talked about today. There are way too many deaths that we're seeing on our roadways, and we need to take action. And we thank you all for taking up this bill, and the City of Tacoma Park supports it and encourages a favorable vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, let's hear from Christy Daphnis. Christy, welcome to the committee, and you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm here as chair of the Montgomery County Pedestrian, Bicycle, and Traffic Safety Advisory Committee. And on behalf of the committee, I ask you to support this bill. In June 2011, I lost my child's daycare provider to a fatal pedestrian crash on Maryland 97 Georgia Avenue. She was crossing Georgia on the way home from her class at Montgomery College. While there was a crash investigation by the police department, nothing happened. A few years later, Robert Grossman was killed approximately 2 blocks away crossing Georgia Avenue. Again, a crash investigation took place, but again, nothing happened. Then in 2020, at the same intersection where Mr. Grossman was killed, his wife was struck and killed, also crossing Maryland 97. Had a Vision Zero infrastructure audit happened following the death of my friend, Exegonite Harissa, perhaps improvements would have been identified and made to this dangerous stretch of roadway. Perhaps SHA would have been able to prevent the deaths of Mr. and Mrs. Grossman through application of a safe systems approach. This is not an uncommon phenomenon in Montgomery County, and I'm sure in other parts of the state. Fatalities happen along state roadways, often in the same locations, and the infrastructure and engineering remain the same. Hopefully, enactment of this bill will help to change the thought process and culture around the specific interventions that are desperately needed. Another important feature of the bill is the transparency it would provide. The bill would require public posting of the fatality infrastructure reviews, which would allow meaningful and fruitful conversations that could lead to policy actions and advocacy that's focused around prevention and solutions, which will ultimately allow us to get to the stated goal of 0 roadway deaths. This bill is long overdue. I thank you for your time and attention to this important matter, and thank you for your support of traffic safety more broadly, including support for the Vision Zero Implementation Act of 2022. Thanks.
Before I go to Christine Slater, Christy, where on Route 97 were those 2 fatalities that involved the husband and wife?
That was in Delegate Stewart's district, near the corner of May in Georgia and the corner of Regina and Georgia. My friend was killed at Regina in Georgia after she exited the bus on her way home from her nursing class. And Mr. and Mrs. Grossman were also on their way home after crossing the street from exiting the bus on their way home from work, I believe.
Okay, thank you. Next, let's listen to Christine Slater. Christine, welcome back to the committee. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Barbie and committee members. I'm Tina Slater. I live in Silver Spring, and I'm speaking on behalf of Maryland Sierra Club. We strongly support the Vision Zero Implementation Act. It is much needed. There are way too many crashes and pedestrian fatalities on state highways, University Boulevard, Georgia Avenue, as Christy was just saying, Rockville Pike, Veers Mill Road. I've attended and viewed online several remembrance services for pedestrians who have died, where white shoes and a wooden plaque with the name of the person that has died is nailed onto a pole at the side of the highway as a memorial and reminder to drivers who pass by that someone was killed here. People cross state highways to access transit. We need the state highways to review each fatality, identify the problem, identify corrective action, and post the review publicly on the SHA website. SUV car sales are up. These cars are much heavier, do much greater damage. Pedestrians and bicyclists are the most vulnerable road users. And when it comes to a crash with an SUV, there is no contest as to who will come out alive. Sierra Club wants people to use transit. We want our roadways to serve all users, and we need SHA to make the roadways much safer. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Miriam Schoenbaum. Miriam, welcome to the committee. You have 2 minutes.
Hi, I'm Miriam Schoenbaum. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on behalf of the Action Committee for Transit, a community transit advocacy group in Montgomery County. I ask for favorable consideration of HB 254. Since 2019, I have volunteered to organize roadside ghost shoe and ghost bike memorials for pedestrians and bicyclists killed in Montgomery County. When a person is killed on a state road in Montgomery County, my group reviews the dangerous infrastructure conditions and asks SHA to make meaningful changes. We do this for free because shockingly, SHA does not do it at all. SHA's mission is to provide a safe, well-maintained, reliable highway system that enables mobility choices for all customers and supports Maryland's communities, economy, and environment. This bill will help SHA achieve their mission, and they should support it. Now, I've been told the reviews will cost $15,000 per killed person. Let's put that number in context. A traffic signal costs about $250,000 to $500,000 to install. In other words, each review of a pedestrian or bicyclist killed on a state road would represent 3 to 6% of the cost of installing one traffic signal. If you think that's too much, please attend our next memorial on February 13th and tell the family their father's life wasn't even worth 1/20th of a traffic signal. SHA should already be doing these reviews without a statutory requirement, but they're not. That is why we need this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, let's turn to Peter Gray. Peter, welcome to the committee. You have 2 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Chairman Barve. I am here representing the Washington Area Bicyclists Association, which has 2,000 members and several thousand other supporters who live in Maryland. We support the passage of HB 254. And I have to say, as a WABA board member and as co-chair of the Montgomery County Families for Safe Streets, I, along with Miriam and Christy and others, have attended numerous of these, organized and attended numerous of these memorials for pedestrians and cyclists who've died in crashes with cars on state roads. And the heartbreaking thing, aside from the fact that every day when people are walking and biking along these roads, they are facing cars going at horrifying speeds. They're on sidewalks that are way too narrow and are filled with telephone poles and other obstacles that make it difficult to use those sidewalks. And they are, in general, conditions that make it unsafe if you're not in a car to use those state highways. In addition, as has been noted, we are doing memorials this year at the exact locations like Ferrara Avenue and Veers Mill Road, or Elton Road and New Hampshire Avenue, where we did memorials last year. We don't want to keep doing this over and over again at the same dangerous spots on our state highways. By mandating a review of a crash involving a fatality and assessing the road conditions and coming up with suggestions on how to redo those roads, we think that we'll make a step forward towards avoiding these horrible, tragic crashes in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And finally, the last witness to provide testimony is the mayor of the terrific city of Rockville, Maryland, Bridget Newton. Madam Mayor, welcome to my committee. Bridget? You might be muted. Is the mayor around?
Mr. Chair, I don't see her in the Zoom room.
Oh, okay.
No, she's not on the call at the moment.
Okay, well, we've got lots of people asking questions. Let's go to the vice chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Delegate, thank you very much for bringing this. And I certainly support trying to reduce pedestrian and bicyclist fatalities to zero. One question about State Highways testimony. They say they already do an infrastructure review after a fatality. Is it your thought that the review that they do isn't as thorough as your bill would require?
Yes, I think that's an accurate way to put it. There is some ambiguity about exactly what is in the current reviews that SHA is doing because they don't currently release those publicly. So we aren't actually able to see how comprehensive of a review they are doing currently. And I do think in some cases they are doing as comprehensive of a review as what is outlined in the bill. And in those cases, we do see action in terms of infrastructure improvements happening on these particular roads or intersections. But in many other cases, I do not believe they are doing as comprehensive of a review as is outlined in the bill. And in fact, are just doing a more simplistic review based off of state of repair of the existing infrastructure.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, if I could just ask one follow-up. And if your bill passes and this review is done and it's publicized, would you then expect state highways to take action in implementing recommendations, or at least the next time there is to be any state expenditures for upgrading, say, that intersection of the road, that they would include the improvements that have been identified?
That's a great question, Delegate. The bill does not require them to take action, but the hope would be that by having this information out there publicly, that local governments, counties, municipalities, and other stakeholders and members of the community can actually keep an eye on what is happening and look for opportunities to pursue these kinds of infrastructure upgrades, either as part of ongoing or already planned projects or as standalone projects.
Okay, thank you.
Next question goes to Delegate Vaughn Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, to the sponsor, thank you very much for bringing this. I don't oftentimes say this sort of thing, but I think this is probably one of the more important bills of the session. And as Christy mentioned, my district has been one of the epicenter for traffic violence in the state. And I'm personally tired of attending memorials. I mean, they're powerful and they're beautiful and they're important, but what's crazy is that, for the benefit of the members of the committee, is now at this point, there's so many different fatalities right in the same cluster that when we start going to one new one, we end up actually paying our respects to 4 or 5 other people because it's so convenient to stop by their gravesite as well. We don't even have to go far outside of the walking path to also pay our respects to all these other victims. And so it's honestly, it's an emergency and it's a crisis. So let me just first say, thank you for bringing this. My remark is about the fiscal note, and I want to give you an opportunity to talk about your take on the fiscal note. Here's the part that I found a little bit strange. The fiscal note basically says it costs $15,000 to perform one of these studies. It's going to be $1.5 million to perform these studies every single year, because the assumption of the fiscal note is that fatalities will remain constant year over year. This seems strange to me because it seems like basically the assumption is that the bill won't work. The assumption inherent in the fiscal note is that we are not going to be able to reduce traffic incidents by performing reviews, and therefore we need to bake in to our fiscal assumption that the cost will remain static over time. That seems strange to me. Do you agree with me that we should probably be at least hopeful that by performing these reviews, we will actually be reducing traffic deaths? And number 2, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about the fiscal note more generally.
Thank you, Delegate Stewart, for raising those points. Yes, I would agree with your assumption that, should this legislation pass, that it will work, as are some of the other activities that SHA is pursuing now or planning to pursue in support of implementation of our state's Vision Zero law. So that fiscal note should go down over time. I'll also note that one of the things that seemed strange to me about the fiscal note is that SHA told the fiscal note drafter that it's $15,000 per review multiplied by the 100 fatalities on the state roadways. But on the other hand, MDOT also acknowledges in their written testimony that they already are doing reviews. As I mentioned to the Vice Chair's question, I think it's a matter of how comprehensive those reviews are, but I think some of the reviews that are happening now would already meet the requirements of the bill, and therefore the fiscal note should be lower just based off of that alone.
Great, thank you.
Delegate Lehman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you so much, Delegate Palakovich-Carr, for your leadership, not just on this bill, but on Vision Zero and improving pedestrian safety across the state. You're doing great work on that front. I want to go back to this question because I'm not understanding it about what the state says it's doing or you think it might be doing, and I understand you're saying that to the degree it is investigating pedestrian fatalities, the findings are not public. So can you just comment at all about what your understanding is of what it is doing? And then the second question is, why wouldn't this information be public, and are they resistant to that idea? That's kind of shocking to think you might have to file a FOIA request to find out what has been determined about a pedestrian fatality. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the questions. So the my understanding of what currently is being done is that at a minimum, the review would include kind of the state of repair of that particular fatal crash site. So they might be looking for, does a crosswalk or lanes need to be restriped? Was there a missing speed limit sign? Was the current traffic light or crosswalk signal functioning properly? At a minimum, they're looking for that, like was something not as it should be that's already deployed? And that beyond that, there seems to be some discretion to the person performing the review as to how much further or how much, what other infrastructure improvements they want to look at or include in their report. So as I mentioned before, there are instances of where we think, again, we haven't been able to see these reports. No one on the outside has been able to see these reports of where they have included some infrastructure improvements, but it seems like that is not the case uniformly at this point. And to your second question about why they're not being made public, I don't have a good answer for that, but I know some of the other stakeholders who testified today have had experience in terms of trying to request these types of reports and might be able to speak to their success in that or lack of success in the past.
Mr. Chairman, can someone answer that if they've tried to request this and could or couldn't get it?
Yeah, we should get to the bottom of that. I mean, at a minimum, we should be increasing the transparency. I can't understand why that would be shrouded. I really can't understand that at all. Yeah, we'll try and find out the proper answer to that. Next question goes to Delegate Healy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you for this bill also. I think that it can go a long way. I know that Delegate Lehman, who has the district next to mine, her district had to deal with all these issues at the University of Maryland and people getting killed crossing the street on Route 1 in the middle of the night. And the state highway responded and did a lot of work there. And shortly after that, there was a fatality in my district of a young mother and her little girl who were hit in a crosswalk, walking home from a grocery store across East-West Highway, Maryland 410. And the saddest thing about that, everything was public because it was such an outrage to the community. But a lot of the sad thing about that was their driver was not doing anything illegal. They're driving this posted speed limit. The pedestrian was in the crosswalk. It was a big, serious engineering problem that needed to be fixed, and it took years. And community, I just want to ask, why can't we put some teeth into this and make them actually do something and not just make reports?
Thank you, Delegate Healy, and thank you for sharing those very tragic stories from your own district. I think that's an issue before the committee. I certainly am supportive of as you say, putting more teeth into things to make sure that we actually have accountability and that we are making our roads safer. So I would be supportive if that was the will of the committee.
Thank you.
Yeah, let me just highlight something I've just seen in the chat. Peter Gray with the Washington Area Bikers Association has said, I'll add that advocates from his organization ACT and MoCo Families for Safe Streets make specific recommendations to SHA to remake the road, and to date, SHA has not implemented. SHA has not implemented any of these recommendations. So just I thought I'd throw that into the public record as well. Delegate Healy, do you have any more questions?
Well, just very briefly, I wanted to say that State Highway has been responsive to the communities that have, in my experience, that they have come out and done all the studies, and those studies are public. The communities did participate in this multi-year process, but we need something more systemic, and I think this bill is the way to do that. But I don't think we should stop with this, so thank you.
Okay, next question goes to Delegate Amprey.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for everyone who has shared some really tragic events that have occurred. I know we get on here and we can talk about it, but it's never hard talking about some of those things and thinking about the people that we've lost to these tragedies. So, my deepest sympathies to those who've had to share about their friends. But I just wanted to get some better insight from the sponsor on the if this would be studying more. So we understand there are studies done on the actual highways and the safety measures and the traffic, but getting a better understanding of the actual type of cars and trucks that are being used on these highways, and even outside of like the commercial usage trucks. I think about in my districts, I've had complaints about there's some trucks that are not commercial, but are big enough to the point where I'm 6'3", and it'd be difficult to even almost see my head, right? So just thinking about like, would this study be getting into the weeds of understanding the amount of, what type of cars are most likely in these accidents? Is there ways we can better regulate the licensing for those who drive these kind of cars and so forth? Just want to get an idea if that is included would that be included in the study, studying the actual types of vehicles that are most involved in these type of accidents?
Thank you for the question. That is outside of the scope of what is anticipated in the bill. We really are looking more so at the physical infrastructure in the roadway, as well as operational things like speed limits at that particular site. But I mean, you raise a really important issue just about as we think about safety on roadways in general and changes in terms of the types of vehicles, the size, the weight of vehicles that people are driving. I think if I recall properly, actually part of the recently enacted federal infrastructure law may actually be looking at that particular issue. And I think there is going to be some more work done at the federal level, and hopefully, they actually have more authority than we do at the state level to try to address those kind of other sorts of systemic safety issues in terms of vehicles.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, next question goes to Delegate Terraza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Delegate Plakovich-Carr, for this bill. I think it's so important, especially as somebody who represents a large portion of Route 1 in Howard County. This is a big issue in my district as well. One question I had about, I'm hoping that this will pass and I can jump on as a sponsor. I will mention that, but because I apparently missed that window there with you. But one question I had was whether the bill will, in the report that SHA does, also look at the location of bus stops in its analysis, because that is one of my big concerns along the Route 1 corridor in my district, is that the location of the bus stops often encourages people to cross in dangerous locations. And I know it's more about the physical infrastructure, but I'm hoping that it will also look at that as well.
Yeah, thank you for raising that. That is a great point. That is not currently outlined in the bill, but I would view that as a friendly amendment. That certainly has been an issue in Montgomery County as well, in terms of location of bus stops not being directly at an intersection where there is a signalized crosswalk. So I would be supportive of adding that in.
Great, thank you.
Delegate, now I should know the answer to this, but I don't, so I'll expose my ignorance. Is there such a thing as a map that has the location of traffic fatalities? Do we have access to anything like that?
It's surprisingly hard to find that data. It is something that I did include, I think, the one map that exists from the state in my written testimony that shows kind of a heat map of where these fatal pedestrian and bicyclist crashes tend to be clustered. I think there will be more data forthcoming. My understanding is that SHA has some grants in place with a couple of academics in the state of Maryland to produce more mapping like that. But right now there isn't much out there publicly.
We don't at least mandate that they publish a list of where traffic fatalities occur so that we could put it into an Excel spreadsheet and do the map for ourselves?
Not specifically. The Vision Zero law did include provisions on using, I believe the phrase was data-driven decision-making. I believe there is another bill that will be before this committee from Delegate Charkoudian this year and probably in the near future that addresses that issue, amongst others, about actually identifying where those specific places are where there tend to be clusters of fatalities.
So if I wanted to, okay, clusters, but I mean, it would be nice if I could get a list of where there have been more than 2 fatalities. I imagine that wouldn't be, I don't know, I actually have no idea whether that would be a large number or a small number. It would be nice to be able to know that. Okay, any further questions for the sponsor or any of the other witnesses? Let's see. I don't see any, so I think that's it for this bill. Thank you, Delegate Polakovich-Carr. That ends the public hearing on House Bill 254. Let's go to the last bill of the afternoon, House Bill 283, Delegate Dana Jones. Dana, welcome to the committee. You have 4 minutes.
Thank you so much, Chairman. Good afternoon, Chairman Barbe, Vice Chair Stein, and members of the Environmental and Transportation Committee. For the record, I am Delegate Dana Jones. I come before you today to reintroduce a bill that passed your brilliant committee unanimously last year and passed the House with a 133-2 vote. HB 283 offers a simple solution to a dangerous problem. Many of our students are forced to ride on overcrowded school buses that don't have enough seats for all the students, with some students even having to stand in the aisle or sit on the floor of the bus. This goes against the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration's recommendation that all school bus passengers be seated while a school bus is in motion. This bill initially came about when parents in this district reached out about 3 years ago regarding this problem after concerns were dismissed by school district officials that use the state law as a rationale for overcrowded buses. It's not against the law. News reports from prior to the pandemic have confirmed that this is a problem in several counties throughout the state. For example, a 2019 performance audit in Anne Arundel County Public School Systems found the school system is not managing its transportation services efficiently and suggested that overcrowded buses could be solved through application of a routing software that is already owned. We can all agree this is essential to secure the safety of all of our children. Students, after a long day of school, can easily become more rambunctious. By the end of the day, children crouched on the floor caused by too many kids on buses can only serve to distract drivers, combating the safety concern. Additionally, this bill includes language that would allow for the limit of students to temporarily exceed seating capacity in cases of emergency, as long as it is corrected in a reasonable amount of time. I'm proud to have the endorsements of the Transit Caucus, as well as the Maryland School Bus Contractors Association. I respectfully urge a favorable report on this simple common sense bill that would keep our children safe as they travel to and from school. Thank you very much.
So refresh my memory before I go on to the next people who are signed up to testify. Refresh my memory. What this bill passed last year?
Yes, sir. Passed out of your committee and then passed the House to a 133-2 vote through the House, and unfortunately ran out of time last year in the Senate.
What committee, Senate committee did it go to? Do you know?
I believe it was in Senator Pinsky's.
Okay, EHEA. All right. All righty then. Next witness is Adam Santry. Adam? No, that's written. I don't think anybody else is signed up to testify, so let's see if we have any questions. No, there are no questions. We're about to, it's looking distressingly like we're at the end of our public hearing. So anyway, Delegate Jones, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That is the end of our public hearing for this afternoon. Announcements.
Mr. Chairman, Delegate Fraser Hidalgo had to go to a meeting, but Motor Vehicles is meeting today at 3.
Okay, thank you very much, Patrick. Any other announcements from subcommittee chairs? No. Any announcements or thoughts from anybody else? Okay, in that case, have a great afternoon. Behave yourselves, people.